What happens when a mother-in-law obsessed with status tries to destroy the poor woman marrying her son? She hurls insults. She plots. She condescends. She plans to humiliate the bride, a quiet librarian in front of everyone. But she's made a fatal mistake. She thinks the bride is marrying for money, not realizing that Elara Vance isn't just marrying into wealth. She's about to inherit an empire that could buy and sell this entire family 1,000 times over. The only question is, when will the mask finally drop? Elara Hayes loved the smell of old books. It was the smell of history, of quiet, of a life lived without pretense. As a senior research librarian at the New York Public Library's Tour, main branch, her world was one of dusty manuscripts and the hushed whispers of academics. Her life was small, contained, and happy. Her favorite worn cardigan, a soft grey cashmere, had a small, skillfully mended hole at the elbow. Her tiny fourth-floor walk-up apartment was filled with more books than furniture. And then there was Liam. Liam Davenport was different. He was a junior analyst at a mid-level investment firm, Davenport and Associates. He was kind. His eyes crinkled when he smiled, and he seemed utterly oblivious to the fact that her shoes were from a thrift store. He loved her for her mind, her quiet strength, and the way she'd meticulously planned their cheap, perfect dates, like a picnic in Central Park with sandwiches she'd made herself. The first time she met his mother, Margaret, the illusion of their simple shared world shattered. Margaret Davenport held court in a sprawling, over-decorated Tudor revival in Scarsdale that screamed new money trying to look old. Every surface was polished to a blinding sheen, and the air was thick with the scent of an aggressive floral potpourri. "So," Margaret had said, her eyes sharp as surgical steel, performing a rapid, humiliating appraisal of Elara. The scan moved from her simple bun to her minimal drugstore makeup, down her J. Crew on sale dress, and landing with disdain on her comfortable, practical flats. "You're the librarian." "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Davenport," Elara said, offering a hand. Margaret looked at the hand for a beat too long before taking it, her grip limp and cold. "Liam has told me so much about you." The pause was an insult in itself. "I must say I'm surprised." "Mom," Liam said, a nervous laugh in his voice. "Elara is brilliant. She's the most well-read person I know." "Oh, I'm sure she is," Margaret said, guiding them not to the plush living room, but to a smaller, colder sunroom. "It's a wonderful hobby. Reading, so quaint." She turned to Elara. "Tell me, dear, where is your family from?" This was the question Elara dreaded. I don't really have any family," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I was raised by my grandfather. He passed away recently." "Oh." Margaret's eyes lit up, not with sympathy, but with the cold, bright light of calculation. "Orphan, no connections, no money." "My condolences. How difficult for you to be all alone. It's a good thing you found Liam. He has such a big heart. He's always taking in strays." Liam choked on his water. "Mom, that's not what I mean." "Oh, hush, Liam. It's a compliment." Margaret smiled a thin, red lipsticked slash. "It shows your character. You're charitable. Elara, you must be so proud of him, and so grateful." Elara just smiled a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She felt Liam's hand find hers under the table. He squeezed. "I'm here," the squeeze said. "I'm sorry." But Elara knew with a sinking, cold certainty that this was only the beginning. Margaret Davenport had appraised her, found her wanting, and declared a war. Elara had never asked to fight. What Margaret didn't know, what no one knew, was that the simple librarian sitting in her sunroom wearing a $40 dress wasn't Elara Hayes. Her full name was Elara Vance, and her recently deceased grandfather, the reclusive industrialist Theodore Vance, hadn't just left her a little something. He had left her everything, the entire 10-figure global empire. Vance Global Holdings, and the lawyer who handled the estate, Mr. Harrison, of the prestigious ironclad firm Sullivan and Cromwell, was just waiting for her call to finalize the transfer. A call she was delaying because for one brief, beautiful moment, she had wanted to be loved for being simply Elara. Liam proposed 6 months later on the Bow Bridge in Central Park. It was snowing lightly, the city noise was muffled, and he didn't have a big speech. He just looked at her, his eyes full of earnest, uncomplicated love, and said, "I don't want to live my life without your brain next to my brain, or your heart next to mine. Will you marry me, Elara?" She said yes, crying, and kissed him. The ring was modest, a simple solitaire he'd clearly saved for months to buy. Elara loved it more than she would have loved the Hope diamond. Margaret, upon hearing the news, went silent for a full 30 seconds. Then she let out a sound like a punctured tire. "Well, that's sudden. I suppose congratulations are in order. And then we will be hosting an engagement party. This Friday, at the club." The club was the Oakview Country Club, a place Margaret and her husband Arthur Davenport could just afford the membership for. It was their primary stage for projecting a wealth they didn't quite possess. Arthur's firm, Davenport and Associates, was propped up by a few key clients, and as Elara would later discover, a worrying amount of debt. Elara arrived at the party with Liam wearing the nicest dress she owned, a simple, elegant navy blue sheath. She'd had her hair done a simple chignon. She immediately felt like a sparrow in a flock of peacocks. The women, Margaret's friends, were a terrifying brigade of taut skin, aggressive jewelry, and judgmental stares. Their names were Brenda and Cynthia, and they descended on Elara like vultures. "So this is the girl," Brenda trilled, her bracelets clacking. "Liam, you didn't tell us she was so natural." "She's a librarian, Brenda," Margaret said, sweeping by with a tray of champagne. "They don't have time for things like highlights." But the true pièce de résistance of Margaret's cruelty was standing by the fireplace. "Oh, look," Margaret cried with the false surprise of a bad actress. "Serafina." "You made it." Serafina was, Elara noted with a dull ache, the physical opposite of her. Tall, blonde, sculpted and draped in a red dress that probably cost more than Elara's rent for the year. She was, as Margaret had mentioned, no fewer than 5 times from the Sinclair family, whose name was plastered on the side of a hospital wing. "Liam, darling," Serafina purred, ignoring Elara completely as she air-kissed Liam. "I was so surprised to hear your news. It all happened so fast. Why, the last time we talked, you swore you were a confirmed bachelor." "Hi, Serafina," Liam said, his back stiffening as he pulled Elara closer. "I'm glad you could make it. This is my fiancée, Elara Hayes." Serafina's eyes, a cold, pale blue, finally landed on Elara. She gave her the same head-to-toe scan Margaret had. "Ah, Yes, the librarian. How charming. Liam, you always did have a soft spot for a project. The night went downhill from there. Margaret orchestrated the entire evening to highlight Alara's otherness. She asked Alara about her non-existent family, her tiny apartment, her little job. With every question, she painted Alara as a desperate, penniless waif who had cleverly trapped her son. The climax of the evening came with the toast. Margaret stood, glass raised, a shark's smile on her face. "To my son Liam." She began, her voice dripping with false emotion. "He has always been such a generous boy, generous with his time, his money, and his heart." She paused, her gaze landing on Alara. "And now he's being so generous in welcoming Alara into our family. We all know that a good marriage is built on strong foundations, and while Alara, well, laughter, while she may not be bringing traditional assets to this union, we are happy to provide her with a foundation she has never known. We are just thrilled that Liam is rescuing her from a life of, well, you know, to Liam and his new bride." The silence that followed was suffocating. A few of Margaret's friends tittered. Liam looked horrified. "Mum, Alara just stood there, her face pale, her hands shaking. She had been publicly, expertly, and viciously branded. She was the charity case, the poor, lucky librarian who had landed the rich son. She turned, and without a word walked out of the room, leaving Liam calling her name, the sound of Margaret's triumphant fake laugh echoing in her ears. Alara didn't go home. She walked. She walked for blocks in the cold Scarsdale night, the thin soles of her shoes clicking on the pavement. The humiliation burned hot in her chest, a physical, sickening weight. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the truth that Margaret had so skillfully twisted. Alara was poor. She did live in a tiny apartment. She was, by all appearances, a stray. She finally sat on a cold park bench. She took out her phone. She didn't call Liam. She called the only other number she had favorited. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to call so late." "Ms. Vance." The voice on the other end was immediate, warm, and sharp as a tack. Mr. Harrison, a senior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell, never seemed to sleep. "It is never too late. Are you all right? You sound distressed." I just..." A sob escaped her, and she muffled it. "My grandfather. Did he know people were like this?" There was a long pause. "Ms. Vance, Alara, your grandfather, Theodore, was one of the shrewdest men I ever knew. He built an empire in a world of sharks. He knew exactly what people were like, and he knew exactly who you were. That is why he protected you, and that is why he left it all to you." Alara thought of her grandfather, a gruff, brilliant, reclusive man. After her parents' early death, he'd raised her, but not in the lap of luxury. He'd raised her in a modest house in Queens, under the pseudonym Theo Hayes, insisting she work for her allowance, get a public library card, and take the bus. He taught her the value of $1, but more importantly, the value of not needing one. He'd only revealed the truth to her when she graduated from Columbia, a scholarship she had earned not knowing his foundation had quietly backed it. He'd shown her the Vance side of his life, the discreet but massive power, the global holdings in logistics, emerging tech, and high-stakes real estate. "Why, Grandpa?" she had asked, stunned. "Why hide this?" "Because Alara," he'd said, his hand on her shoulder. "Money is a poison. It rots the soul. People will either hate you for it or love you for it, and both are a curse. I wanted you to grow up real, to find someone who loves you, the librarian, not you, the heiress. And when you find that person, you'll know. And then you'll be ready for this. He had died 2 months ago, and the entire weight of Vance Global Holdings was now sitting in probate, waiting for her, Ilara Hayes Vance, to sign the final papers and assume her role as chairwoman. "Mr. Harrison," Ilara said, her voice small. "Margaret, Liam's mother. She called me a stray, a charity case. She thinks I'm marrying him for his money." Harrison let out a dry, humorless chuckle. The irony is so thick it's suffocating. The Davenports. Yes, I'm aware of them. Arthur Davenport's little firm has a, shall we say, aspirational portfolio. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ms. Vance, that our acquisition analysis division, as a matter of due diligence for your inheritance, has looked into all of your fiancé's known associates. Davenport and Associates is leveraged to the hilt. Their largest line of credit is held by Archard Private Bank." "So," Ilara said, rubbing her cold hands together. "So," Harrison said, his voice hardening slightly. "As of 9 a.m. Monday, a subsidiary of Vance Global Holdings, you will be the new majority owner of Archard Private Bank. Miss Vance, you are not marrying into the money. You are, in fact, your future father-in-law's banker." Ilara's breath hitched. She humiliated me." "Then," Mr. Harrison said, his voice flat and professional, "it is time for you to stop being a librarian. It is time for you to become the chairwoman. Your grandfather's final instructions were very clear. He called it the Clarity Protocol. He said you would know when it was time to activate it. Is it time, Ms. Vance?" Ilara looked up at the dark, empty branches of the trees. She thought of Liam's kind eyes, and she thought of Margaret's triumphant, cruel laugh. "Not yet," Ilara whispered. Liam, he's coming after me. He's defending me. He didn't know. He defended you. He tried. He's a good man, Mr. Harrison. He's just trapped. I need to know. I need to know he loves me. Not the librarian, not the heiress. Just me. I need to see him break free on his own. That is a very dangerous, very noble, and very Vance thing to do, Ilara. Be careful. These people are not playing. Your grandfather's estate is not a game." "I know," she said, as Liam's car pulled up his headlights, washing over her on the bench. He ran out, not even closing the door. "I have to go. Thank you, Mr. Harrison." "Ilara!" Liam yelled, running to her. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. What she said, it was monstrous. I've never—" He pulled her into his arms and she buried her face in his coat. He was warm. He was real. "I don't care about the party, Liam," she whispered. "I don't care about her." "I do," he said, his voice fierce, pulling back to look at her. I told her if she ever speaks to you like that again, we're done. You and me. We can elope. We don't need them." Ilara looked at his face, so full of love and genuine anger on her behalf. He is a good man. She thought, the warmth returning to her heart. Not yet, Mr. Harrison. He's worth the wait. The next 2 months were a cold war. Margaret, having been severely reprimanded by a terrified Liam and a pragmatic Arthur, who likely knew his son was marrying up, just not in the way he thought, retreated into a state of passive-aggressive martyrdom. She'd agreed to help with the wedding, which translated to hijacking every decision and turning it into a referendum on Ilara's background. A cash bar. Margaret had gasped, fanning herself when Ilara suggested a simple reception. "Ilara, dear, we are Davenports. We do not ask our guests to pay for their drinks. It's tacky. It's common. I just thought since we're paying for our half." "Oh, your half?" Margaret had sighed as if Ilara had suggested they hold the reception in a back alley. "Darling, Liam's half is by default our half, and we will not be serving kegs." The true battlefront, however, was the dress. Ilara had a simple request. She wanted to wear her mother's wedding dress. It was a simple vintage lace gown, timeless and beautiful. It just needed a few minor alterations. Margaret would not have it. "It's lovely, dear," she'd said, eyeing the dress at the seamstress's shop as if it were a dish rag. "But it's old and, well, a bit yellowed. Don't you want something new, something white?" "I like it," Ilara said firmly. "It's my mother's." "Yes," Margaret said, a fake, pitying tone entering her voice. "But you're a Davenport now, Ilara, or you will be, and the Davenports have a standard to maintain. People will be looking." Margaret, in a move of stunning aggression, scheduled an appointment at the Vera Wang flagship on Madison Avenue, just to look dear. Ilara went sensing the trap. Liam and Margaret were ushered into a private, plush viewing room. A smiling consultant brought out dress after dress, each one a froth of tulle and silk, each one costing more than Ilara's annual salary. "Now this," Margaret breathed as a model emerged in a gown that was more architecture than dress, "is a wedding. This is a statement." "It's beautiful," Ilara said honestly. "But it's not me, and it's 18,000. Price is just a number, darling." Margaret waved her hand. "When you're talking about the most important day of your life, it shows investment." Liam, sensing Ilara's discomfort, stepped in. "Mom, it's beautiful, but Ilara gets to choose her own dress. If she wants to wear her mother's, she will." Margaret's face tightened. The consultant, sensing the tension, quickly said, "Of course, perhaps something more classic." Ilara was saved by her phone buzzing, an urgent text from the library. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway. It was Mr. Harrison. Text meeting moved up. "Board of Archard Bank requests your presence. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., your first act as owner." Ilara's stomach flipped. This was real. Text can't. Wedding rehearsal. Text reschedule the rehearsal. This is a $400 million debt portfolio. They need to see the new chairwoman. Your car will be at your apartment at 9 a.m. Wear a suit. Ilara returned to the dress room, her mind miles away, her spine several inches straighter. Margaret was holding up a tiny, crystal-encrusted bodice. "Ilara, we thought this one was a perfect compromise." "No," Ilara said. The room went silent. "No," Margaret repeated, her voice dangerously sweet. "No, that's not my dress," Ilara said, her voice clear and strong. It was the first time she'd used the chairwoman voice. "My dress is at the seamstress. I am wearing my mother's dress. Thank you for your time." She looked at Liam. "I have to go. I'll see you at dinner." She walked out of Vera Wang, leaving Liam, Margaret, and a very confused consultant in her wake. Margaret was apoplectic. "What is with her?" she hissed at Liam. "Who does she think she is? Walking out like that. She's getting a little too big for her second hand britches, Mum." Liam warned, his face dark. "I'm serious, Liam. This is what happens. You give them a taste of our life, and they get demanding. They think they're entitled. She's ungrateful. After all we're doing for her." "All you're doing," Liam snapped, "is trying to steamroll her. You're trying to turn her into you, and I'm not marrying you, Mum. I'm marrying her. It's her dress. It's her wedding. End of story." Liam stormed out, leaving Margaret alone in the room of white dresses, her face a mask of incandescent fury. The war was no longer cold. The night of the rehearsal dinner, the air at the Oakview Country Club was so thick with tension you could have cut it with one of the club's non-steak knives. Elara was wearing her mother's dress, now perfectly tailored. She looked radiant, and she knew it. Liam hadn't left her side, his hand a warm, constant presence on her back. Arthur Davenport looked nervous, constantly checking his phone and avoiding his wife's gaze. And Margaret was smiling. It was a new smile. It wasn't her fake social smile. It was a tight, triumphant, venomous smile. She was gliding around the room, greeting guests, her voice high and brittle. She looked like a predator that had just cornered its prey. "She's up to something," Elara murmured to Liam as Margaret tapped a fork against her champagne glass for yet another toast. "Let's just get through this," Liam murmured back. "Tomorrow we're married. Then we go to Hawaii, and I'm turning my phone off for 2 weeks. Everyone," Margaret trilled her voice, silencing the room. "Thank you all for coming. We are so excited for tomorrow. It's a merger of families, and as we all know, a good merger requires paperwork." A few people chuckled, confused. Arthur suddenly looked like he was going to be sick. "Arthur, darling," Margaret said, snapping her fingers. Arthur, his face ashen, stood and walked to the head table. He was holding a thick, blue, leather-bound document. He placed it in front of Elara with a trembling hand. "Mum, what is this?" Liam said, his voice dropping. "Just a formality, darling," Margaret said, her smile widening. "A prenuptial agreement. You know, just to protect the family. To make sure everyone's intentions are clear." Elara looked down. On the cover in gold-embossed letters, it read, "Domestic Agreement, Davenport and Hayes." Liam's face went from confused to pale to a deep, blotchy red. "You didn't," he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "Liam, it's standard practice," Margaret said, her voice turning sharp. "Seraphina's family had one all the Sinclair girls did. It just keeps things clean. Right, Arthur?" Arthur wouldn't meet his son's eyes. Elara, her hands perfectly steady, opened the document. Her eyes, trained from years of research, scanned the pages. She saw the clauses. Clause 4A. The wife, Elara. Hayes agrees that all assets, properties, and holdings of the husband, Liam Davenport, and of the husband's family, hereafter, the Davenport estate shall remain the sole and separate property of said estate in perpetuity, Clause 7C. In the event of marital dissolution, the wife shall be entitled to a one-time lump sum payment of $10,000 for each full year of marriage, capped at a maximum of $50,000. Clause 9B. The wife agrees in the event of dissolution to vacate any shared properties within 30 days and to make no further claim, public or private, upon the Davenport name or assets. It was a public, legal, and utterly devastating final insult. Margaret had in front of everyone put a price tag on her. $50,000. Elara looked up, her face blank. She met Margaret's victorious, glittering eyes. "Mum," Liam said. His voice was deathly quiet. Every person in the room was frozen. "You did this. You went to a lawyer. You typed this up. You planned to do this. Here. Tonight." "Liam, it's just business. You," Liam said, his voice rising, "are the most vile, toxic, manipulative." He was shaking. He looked at Elara, whose face was a mask of cold stone. "Elara," he said, don't sign it." "Oh, she'll sign it." Margaret sneered, her composure cracking. "She knows what side her bread is buttered on. She's not going to walk away from this." She gestured around the tacky room. "Over a little paperwork. She's a smart girl. She knows a good deal when she sees one. She's trading. Nothing. For everything." That was it. That was the moment. The final fatal error. Liam looked at his mother, and it was as if he was seeing her for the first time. The scales didn't just fall from his eyes. They shattered. He saw the cruelty, the obsession, the emptiness. He saw that she wasn't protecting him. She was using him. He picked up the heavy leather-bound document. "Liam, don't you dare!" He ripped it in half. Then he ripped the halves in half. The sound of tearing paper was the only sound in the room. He threw the pieces on the floor at his mother's feet. "You're done," he said to her, his voice low and vibrating with a finality that chilled the room. "You have been a poison in my life for years, and I let you. I let you hurt the only person I have ever truly loved, because I was weak, and because I was your son." He turned to the room. "The wedding is off." Elara's head snapped up. "No." "No, wait," Margaret said, her face draining of all color. "This was not part of the plan. Liam, don't be dramatic." "The reception is off," Liam corrected, his voice like ice. "The party at this club is off. My life with you is off." He turned to Elara. "Elara, I love you. I am so sorry. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. But we are not getting married here. And she, he pointed at his mother, is not coming. You're not invited." He took Elara's hand. "Let's go." "You'll be back," Margaret shrieked, her voice cracking the mask of the society matron gone, revealing the terrified, ugly woman beneath. "You'll crawl back. When she's bled you dry, you'll be back. She's a leech. Liam A. Gold. Digging. Leech." Liam and Elara didn't look back. They walked out of the room, leaving Margaret standing alone in a sea of torn paper and stunned silence. They were in Liam's car, parked in the club's lot. Liam's head was on the steering wheel. He was sobbing. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet, racking sobs of a man whose world had just been irrevocably broken. Elara, her own heart aching, just put her hand on his back. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Elara, I'm so sorry. I can't even." "Liam," she said, her voice soft. "Look at me." He lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face a mess. "I've ruined everything. Our wedding." "You didn't ruin anything," she said, taking his face in her hands. You saved it. You saved us. What you just did, that was the bravest, most wonderful thing I have ever seen." "But the wedding, all our guests—" "It's just a party, Liam," Elara said. "We can get married at City Hall. We can elope. I don't care. I have you, and you just proved you have me." He looked at her, the love in his eyes so raw and real it made her chest ache. "I love you, Elara Hayes, more than anything. I don't care if we're poor. I don't care if we live in your tiny apartment forever. I just want you." This was it. The moment. The test her grandfather had set. The moment she knew that he loved her, the librarian. He had stood up to the dragon. He had chosen her, even when he thought she had nothing. "I love you, Liam Davenport," she said, and kissed him. "But we're not going to City Hall." She pulled out her phone. "Who are you calling?" "A friend," she said, her thumb hovering over the contact. "A wedding planner of sorts. Liam, do you trust me?" "With my life," he said without hesitation. She smiled a true, brilliant smile. "Good, because our wedding is still on for tomorrow. It's just had a significant venue change and a guest list update." She pressed the call button. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice dropping into a register Liam had never heard before. It was crisp, clear, and brimming with absolute authority. "It's Elara." She paused, listening. "Yes, he did. He's a good man." Another pause. "Yes," she said, her eyes glittering in the dark. "It's time. Activate the Clarity Protocol. Full press. I want the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, Bloomberg, everyone. And I want the board of Archard Bank. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the St. Regis Astor Ballroom." Liam was staring at her, his mouth open. "Elara." "What?" She held up a finger, still listening to Harrison. "Yes. Send the jet for the Paris partners. I want them here." "And Harrison?" "Yes," she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Send an invitation to Margaret and Arthur Davenport. Use my full name. I want to make sure they're there." She hung up. She turned to a completely bewildered Liam. "Elara? Hayes? What is going on? Who is Mr. Harrison? What's the St. Regis? What is Archard Bank?" "Archard Bank," Elara said, taking his hand, "is the bank that holds your father's debt. And Mr. Harrison is my family's lawyer. And my name isn't Elara Hayes." She took a deep breath. "It's Elara Vance. My grandfather was Theodore Vance. And well, Liam, I'm the new chairwoman of Vance Global Holdings." The Astor Ballroom at the St. Regis was not a room. It was a statement. Gilt-encrusted ceilings, antique crystal chandeliers, and walls draped in silk. It was a place designed for the declaration of dynasties and the ruin of empires. And it was into this hallowed hall that Margaret and Arthur Davenport walked, or rather were herded, at 9:45 a.m. Their morning had been a blur of pure, unadulterated panic. The 6 a.m. hand-delivered embossed invitation had been the first shock. "Elara Vance, chairwoman, Vance Global Holdings," it read, "requests your presence." "It's a typo." Margaret had insisted, her hands shaking, her voice high and brittle. "She's a Hayes. It's a pathetic little con. She's trying to extort us. She's angry about the prenup. Arthur, however, had gone silent. He had spent the last 3 hours on his laptop, his face growing progressively paler, his breathing more shallow. He had Googled Theodore Vance. He had Googled Vance Global Holdings. He had seen the obituaries, the reclusive billionaire, the mentions of a single unknown heir. And in a final frantic search that had him clutching his chest, he had Googled the new majority stakeholder of Archard Private Bank, the very institution that held the notes on his entire life. "Arthur," Margaret had shrieked, yanking on her garish peach-coloured mother-of-the-groom dress. "What is it? What aren't you telling me? Where is Liam? He won't answer his phone. We have to go, Margaret." Arthur had whispered, his eyes wide and vacant. We just have to go." Now standing in the back of the ballroom, they were fossils on display. They were cordoned off, not with the red velvet ropes of a VIP section, but with the cold professional barrier of 2 stone-faced security guards. This was not the Oakview Country Club. The women here didn't clack with jewelry. They glowed with the subdued, terrifying aura of old money. The men in dark, identical Brioni and Zegna suits weren't gossiping. They were monitoring. The air was electric with the low, expectant hum of real power. Journalists from the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg and the Financial Times lined the aisles, their faces grim, their recorders already on. A dozen bankers, vice presidents from J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and their terrified rivals at Archard huddled near the front, all whispering the same 2 questions. Who is she? And what does she want? Margaret, still in denial, scanned the room with a sneer. It's all so impersonal, she hissed to Arthur. So cold. No wonder she has no friends. Margaret, be quiet, Arthur pleaded, wiping a sheen of sweat from his upper lip. Just, please, be quiet. At 10 a.m. on the dot, the side doors opened, and Mr. Harrison walked to the podium. He was not the warm, reassuring lawyer from the phone. He was an executioner in a $10,000 suit. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed, sharp and definitive. Thank you for coming on such short notice. We are at a pivotal moment. The estate of Theodore Vance, founder and guiding genius of Vance Global Holdings, has, as of 8 a.m. this morning, officially cleared probate. A wave of murmurs and the rapid clicking of keyboards filled the room. As per the final incontrovertible will of Mr. Vance, his entire estate, his holdings, and his full controlling interest in Vance Global and its subsidiaries have passed to his sole heir. For the past several years, this heir has been operating under a directive of anonymity, a personal request from Mr. Vance himself to study the world from a different vantage point. Harrison allowed himself a small, dry smile. That directive has now expired. It is my profound personal and professional honor to introduce to you the new undisputed chairwoman of the board of Vance Global Holdings, Ms. Ilara Vance. The main doors at the back of the ballroom swung open, and Ilara walked in. It was, Margaret thought, as if a bomb had gone off. The light in the room seemed to change, bending toward the woman who had just entered. 100 camera flashes ignited at once, a rolling thunder of strobes that illuminated her path. This was not Ilara Hayes. This was not the quiet, mousy librarian in the mended grey cardigan. This was not the girl who blushed and looked at her second-hand shoes. This was a queen. She was wearing a custom-tailored cream-coloured silk wool suit by Armani Privé. It was not a dress. It was armour. Her hair, which she'd always worn in a soft, messy bun, was pulled back into a sleek, severe chignon that exposed the elegant line of her throat and the sharp, intelligent planes of her face. She wore no jewelry, save for a pair of simple diamond studs and a slim gold Cartier tank watch on her left wrist. Her walk was the most terrifying part. She didn't scurry. She didn't hurry. She strode. Her heels clicked on the marble floor with a slow, deliberate, metronomic rhythm, a countdown. Her eyes, which Margaret had always dismissed as mousy, were now cool, appraising, and utterly terrifyingly calm. They were the eyes of her grandfather, and beside her, walking in step, his face a mask of awe, terror, and incandescent pride, was Liam. He too was transformed. Gone was the rumpled J. Crew analyst. In his place was a man in a perfectly tailored midnight blue Tom Ford suit, a welcome gift from Mr. Harrison's team that had been waiting in the hotel suite they had decamped to after the disastrous rehearsal. He looked, Margaret realized with a sickening lurch, like he belonged with this creature. His hand was not on Elara's back in a gesture of protection. His hand was in hers, and she was leading him. "No," Margaret whispered, her manicured nails digging into Arthur's arm. "No, it's a trick. It's a costume. It's... Arthur, what is this?" Arthur just moaned a low, defeated sound. Elara and Liam ascended the stage, not even flinching at the wall of sound from the press. "Ms. Vance! Ms. Vance! What is your first move as chairwoman? What is the new direction for Vance Global? Is the Archard acquisition hostile? What are your intentions?" Elara walked to the podium. She didn't tap the microphone. She simply stood before it. And the room fell silent. The chaos ceased. The shouting died. Every eye was on her. She took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was not the quiet librarian's murmur. It was a clear, crisp, and cultured alto, amplified by the speakers filling every corner of the vast ballroom. "Good morning," she said. "I am Elara Vance." She paused, letting the simple 5-word statement land with the force of a gavel. In the front row, the Bloomberg reporter's jaw was slack. "For the past 4 years, I have lived a life of deliberate anonymity. It was a project, if you will, designed by my grandfather, Theodore. He believed, and I have come to agree, that to truly understand the value of an empire, you must first understand the value of a life lived without one." Her eyes scanned the crowd moving past the bankers, past the press until they found and locked with Margaret's. "He wanted me to learn the world, not from a boardroom, but from the ground. I have worked. I have paid rent on a 4th-floor walk-up. I have taken the subway. I have mended my own clothes. And I have listened. I have listened to people in all walks of life. And I have learned." Her gaze hardened just a fraction. "I have learned that so much of what the world calls business is just noise. It is ego. It is projection. It is fragile people building fragile hollow houses of cards, all to impress other fragile hollow people." Arthur Davenport audibly gasped, as if she had just struck him. "My grandfather," Elara continued, her voice gaining strength, "built an empire on bedrock, on logistics, on tangible assets, on patents, on reality. As of 8 a.m. this morning, that empire is mine. And my leadership will reflect that philosophy. We will be investing in reality, in strength, in substance, and in accountability." She turned her head slightly. "Which brings us to our first order of business." She nodded to Mr. Harrison, who stepped forward, holding a single, slim file. "Thank you, Ms. Vance. As the new and sole majority owners of Archard Private Bank, we have spent the pre-dawn hours conducting a full audit of the bank's more troubled commercial loan portfolios. Mr. Harrison put on a pair of silver-rimmed reading glasses, a purely theatrical gesture. It has come to our immediate attention that one firm in particular has been derelict in its fiduciary responsibilities. That firm is Davenport and Associates, Mr. Arthur Davenport, proprietor. It was as if a vacuum had sucked all the air from the room. Margaret's face, a rictus of confusion, snapped toward her husband. "Arthur, what is this lie?" Harrison, ignoring her, continued in his dry courtroom monotone. "We have here a primary line of credit leveraged at 110% of stated, and we now find overstated assets. We have two separate breached loan covenants, one on October the 1st, one on November 3rd, which Mr. Davenport neglected to report." He looked up, his eyes cold. "And we have a default on a $4.2 million interest payment due 5 p.m. yesterday. The firm is by every legal and financial definition insolvent. It is a house of cards." This time Margaret screamed. It was not a shriek. It was a raw, primal, animalistic scream of pure, undiluted rage and confusion. "No, you're lying!" she shrieked, finally breaking free of Arthur's grasp and stumbling past the now useless security rope. She staggered into the aisle, her peach dress a grotesque splash of color in the sea of dark suits. You did this." She pointed a shaking, red-nailed finger at Elara. "You tramp, you librarian, you're nothing, you're a con artist. Arthur, tell them she's a leech. She seduced my son, she planned this. She's a gold-digging, horrible." The word died in her throat. Two large security guards had moved in, each taking one of her arms. "Ma'am, you need to—" Elara held up a single calm hand. The guards froze. They, like everyone else in the room, were now hers to command. Elara picked up the wireless microphone from the podium. She stepped away from the lectern, walking slowly, deliberately, to the very edge of the stage, until she was standing directly above the woman who had for 6 long months made her life a living hell. Margaret stared up her chest, heaving her face a blotchy, tear-streaked ruin. Her eyes wild with a hatred that was now indistinguishable from terror. "Me." Elara's voice was quiet, almost conversational, but the microphone made it an intimate, terrifying thunder. "Did I do this, Margaret?" She took a step closer. "Did I sign your husband's name on loans he knew he could never repay? Did I spend a decade living a lie, funding your country club memberships and your Vera Wang fantasies on borrowed money? Borrowed time, just to impress people you despise?" Elara's voice dropped. "You have been appraising me for 6 months. You've been worried about my background, my assets, my intentions. You, who live in a house of lies. You, who are and have always been a charity case." Margaret gasped a ragged, wet sound, as if she'd been physically struck. Elara had just used her own venomous words against her. "You were right about one thing, Margaret," Elara continued, her voice now cold and final. "A good merger does require paperwork. It requires clarity. As of this moment, the debt on your firm is called. The debt on your home is called. Vance Global is foreclosing. As of now. No. My house," Margaret whispered, her fight gone, replaced by a horrifying, hollow void. Everything. You can't. I can, Elara said simply. But I'm a generous person. She looked back at Liam, and her face softened just for a second. Liam gets that from me, I think. And I don't want to leave you with nothing. That would be tacky. It would be common. She walked back to the podium past the stunned, silent Liam. She reached into her suit jacket and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. Not a thick legal document. Just a check. She walked back to the edge of the stage. She did not hand it to Margaret. She handed it to Liam. Liam, his face carved from granite, looked at the check, then at Elara. A flicker of understanding of shared terrible justice passed between them. He nodded once. He walked down the steps. He walked past his father, who was now weeping silently into his hands. He stood in front of his mother. She looked up at him, her eyes pleading the last vestiges of her maternal authority, desperately trying to find purchase. "Liam, baby, please, she's a—" "You're done, Mum," Liam said, his voice flat, dead, and utterly final. He held out the check. Margaret's shaking hands took it. Her eyes blurred with tears and mascara tried to focus. It was a cashier's check, drawn from Archard Private Bank, made out to Margaret Davenport. In the memo line, "In full satisfaction of all claims." And the amount in crisp digital print, $50,000, Margaret's brain stalled. It tried to process the number. $50,000. The exact, insulting, humiliating, devastating sum. The price she had put on Elara. The cap on her worth. It was now being offered as her total, final, and pathetic severance. The irony was so complete, so suffocating, it broke her. Her knees, her spine, her very soul gave way. She didn't faint. She collapsed. A ragged, ugly sob tore from her throat as she crumpled onto the priceless St. Regis carpet, the check fluttering from her limp hand. The room was utterly, profoundly silent. The journalists had forgotten their questions. The bankers had forgotten their stock prices. They had just witnessed a public execution. Elara watched for one long, cold beat. Then she turned. She walked back to Liam, who was already ascending the stairs, and took his hand, pulling him up to her level. She faced the press, her composure perfect. Her voice was clear, all business once more. "Mr. Harrison will handle the details of the Davenport and Associates restructuring. As for me—" She turned and smiled at Liam, a real, warm, brilliant Elara smile, a smile that flooded her face with a light the cameras had missed. "I have a wedding to attend. My real wedding." She looked back at the stunned room. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That will be all." Hand in hand they turned. They didn't run. They walked. They walked off the stage through the side door, where a black Rolls-Royce was waiting, leaving the flashbulbs, the shouting, the financial ruin, and the ruins of Margaret Davenport behind them. In the end, Margaret's cruelty wasn't just a private humiliation. It was a catastrophic business mistake. She tried to insult the poor bride, not knowing she was standing in the way of the one person who held her entire fragile world in her hands. Elara and Liam were married that afternoon, not at the St. Regis, but on the lawn of her grandfather's, now her private estate in the Hamptons. It was small. The only guests were Mr. Harrison and the few old friends who had loved Elara when she was just a poor librarian. As for Margaret, she took the check. She had no choice. She and Arthur disappeared, moving to a small condo in Florida, their names erased from the New York society pages. Elara, as her first act, didn't destroy Davenport and Associates. She restructured it, absorbed its few good employees, and folded its assets into a new ethical division of Vance Global. She didn't just win, she changed the game. Thank you for listening to this story. It just goes to show that you should never ever judge a book by its cover, or a bride by her second-hand shoes. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. If you loved this story of drama twists and sweet, sweet karma, please show your support. It helps us so much. Don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a good story. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were Elara? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.